Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith, where we are talking to real people about real challenges and real solutions in the hopes of giving other people a chance to face their own challenges and find a way out. Today, I am really excited to have with me a really good friend and a brother in recovery and in the recovery community, RJ Elizarraz. Man, RJ, thanks for stopping in today and coming on Overcome Out Loud, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great, and I know a bit about your story, and I know who you are today. And I think one of the greatest things is about what we're doing here is that no matter how far down and how hopeless life has seemed for people, that there is a set of behaviors that go along with digging ourselves out, even when it seems so hopeless. And I know you got to that point, and we're going to talk about that. And thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and your willingness to help other people through your story. So, I think all of us, come from somewhere. So can you take us back a little bit and tell us about, young RJ and where you grew up and kind of, what that all looked like? I mean, everybody's past influences, to a large extent, some of the things that happen to them and choices we make, and, take us back a little bit.
Yeah. I'll take you back. I think it's important to talk about where it came from. So I'm glad you asked. I absolutely agree that I think, how we grow up, the situations we grow up in and our early childhoods absolutely affect, kind of the patterns and the beliefs that we have today. Right. And overcoming those. And I was just on a phone call as I was outside your office, and I was talking to a good friend of mine, and we were talking about we were actually talking about marketing, right? So we were talking about, how do you get a word out there, one that resonates, one that people can really latch onto and understand and feel. And I think so much of it has to go with, the personal journey of where somebody comes from, and any way that I can use, my story, where I came from, and how, to help somebody else is the mission that I'm on. So and to that point, I'm really grateful to be here. Seriously, this is, this podcast and what you're doing, I think is so crucial and so important, man. It's filling a need, which is hope, which is what people need.
Right on.
And it's something that I needed. It's something I needed when I was younger, and I didn't see a lot of, And so I really appreciate what you're doing here. And I grew up in Westlake Village. So I'm born and raised right here where this podcast is. I was born at Los Robles Hospital, January 15th, 1988. Mom and dad were from the Valley, so they grew up in San Fernando Valley. Dad came from kind of a broken home. His mom had passed away when he was somewhere between 15 and 18, and in a really horrific way. And his dad was in war, was a military guy. Korean War was, fought at it was that historic battle on the mountain. I can't remember what it was called. He watched a lot of his friends die. Really, traumatic. He came home, and I think he took a lot of that out on my dad. And my dad, ran away from home at a young age and didn't go to school, didn't graduate high school, got in a lot of trouble. My mom was kind of the younger good kid in the San Fernando Valley, and the two of them got together, and he was, the classical bad guy, and my mom was, the classic good girl in high school, and the two of them link up, and my dad starts hustling the streets and selling cars, and had this really strong work ethic that he got from a really young age, and it was all about work and make money and press forward, right? And so I say that because when I was born, my parents were together. They had moved out to Agora Hills, and I never saw my dad. Never saw my dad. He had started his own business that was located out on the far reaches of the valley. And he dedicated, every moment that he was awake to working. Right?
Sure.
That was his thing.
Right.
I'm going to bring home the money, and I'm going to go work, and I'm going to be successful. And that was his idea of a man and what a man should do. And so I was at home with my mom every day, and my dad ended up, making some good money, right? And he was pretty successful. And we moved over to North Ranch. He built a house. I can remember from the age of 5, really wondering, where's my dad? You know what I mean? Wanting to see my dad.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you look back and reflect on the absence of your dad, or were you aware of at the time the fact that, and it sounds like you were actually very acutely aware of the fact as a kid, and I think some of us obviously have the experiences of, even at that age, of other kids who, hey, that guy's dad's around and my dad's not. So you had an awareness even at that age that your dad was absent
100%.
during a lot of your life.
Yeah, I had a best friend who lived down the street. I can remember from the age of 5, and I remember his dad being around, and I'd go over there and hang out, and his dad's in the house eating dinner with the family. I'd go there and have dinner with their family, and wonder why I didn't see my dad, right?
Yeah.
And I remember countless nights. I'm a young kid, so I got to go to school. I got to go to bed early, and I remember just constantly trying to rebel. I want to stay up. I want to see my dad. And I remember my mom always having this kind of, apprehension, right? Like, no, you got to go to bed. Almost like she knew he wasn't going to be home until really late. And, I was never going to be able to stay up that late. And I think she just didn't want to see me be let down, right? Over and over again. So she went ahead and just said, no, it's bedtime. You got to go to bed, right? And at the age of 7, I remember coming back from summer camp, and there was a, massive moving truck. Parents were getting divorced. My room was being packed up, and I was being shuttled over to a house over at the top of Lindero in Westlake, and that's where I was now going to live with my younger brother and sister and my mom. And then again, Dad was kind of taken off, and really didn't have a relationship with him for probably the next 3 years of my life.
Yeah, I think people that's impactful in so many ways. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I imagine my son at 7. I imagine what a young child is like at 7, and to come home from kind of a camp experience and to see that, and I don't think people realize the fibers that are ripped apart when a family does separate, and that a divorce, even a divorce with parents that are getting along, can be traumatic for a child, to lose that concept of a family, especially, as you said, the reflection of other families where this is what a family is, the family dinner, parents at home, dad coming home. And now all of a sudden I'm different then. I'm from a broken home. And that has kind of a negative attachment for a kid, especially at that age when he needs safety and security. Did you feel that loss at that age when you came home, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done some work on it, and,
Sure.
And I've got this incredible team around me today, and this, they specialize in something called EMDR, trauma therapy,
Right.
And we've processed a lot of it, and it's and that's why it's so fresh in my mind right now as I'm recounting this. And it's we were doing work on it last week, really intensive work, and it's this idea of a 7-year-old RJ who's being dropped off at a house, feeling like he's supposed to take care of the family, right? Like feeling like, dad's gone, security's been kind of ripped away. There was intimations by my dad that watch your brother and sister, and really feeling from that moment completely inadequate to do so.
Yeah,
right?
Overwhelmed.
And also this need to want to, I hadn't seen my dad, right? So I had this internal need to prove my self-worth, right? Like to impress him, to do what he asked, right? To really go above and beyond, to show that I could do it. And I took that very seriously, right? And I remember, the following year was just, it was, yes, I have a mission. And then quickly after, I have no idea how to do this. And I'm completely inadequate, and I do not have the tools. And, I remember that taking a huge toll on me as a young kid. I remember, in elementary school, from that point forward, my grades started to suffer. I remember getting in trouble a lot. There was, I went to Westlake Hills Elementary. There were yard duties, and I remember getting constantly, I would have to sit on the wall and write standards. I mean, it was like probably 2-3 times a week. I found myself sitting on the wall, writing standards over and over and over again, whatever it was. I mean, it was like, you can't eat outside of this, certain eating area. And I just would step outside just to break the rules. And I think it was this, this thing for, I wanted control, I wanted to control my environment. You know, I didn't want someone to tell me what to do, and I wanted to rebel. I wanted to be something that I wasn't, and I wanted to prove to the world that I was, right?
Yeah, so a bit of that imposter syndrome already creeping up on you, like I'm supposed to be this, and if I can show you that I am, even though inside I know I'm not. I don't have the tools to do this right now.
Totally.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and it's important. I've heard people say, "Oh, you didn't have a bad childhood; you just had a long childhood." And I really want to, just step back and talk about the benefits of really reflecting on, and not as I think you and I share, a history, of incidents that happened during our youth and a history of dealing with them. And it's not in a way of a victim. It's like, but it's not what's wrong with me. It's just what happened to me because, these things reframed and rechanneled the way our brain worked. And we started to develop patterns out of survival, out of, and for you in school, yes, it was rebellion, but it's also attention seeking in a negative way. But it's like, I can't get attention here, but I can get attention even if I'm sitting on the wall. At least a teacher's talking. At least someone's acknowledging that I exist. At least I'm getting paid attention to it. And we start to develop unhealthy ways to do that in pattern. And as you demonstrate, what we get a payoff from those unhealthy behaviors, which is attention, and you keep doing them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I applaud you, and EMDR and talk therapy and all of the other things that are available. I think it's so great that people like yourself and your program and just as us as individuals embrace the fact that there's things that we can do to really reframe our past experiences. But it left you there as a young age, already with a false self. As I experienced, we disassociated, and you've created this false self, which is not who you want to be, and it's not what you're capable of being, and there's been a lot asked of you, and it creates pressure. It creates uncomfortable feelings.
You know what? It creates fear.
Yeah,
right.
Fear.
It creates fear, and for me, you put me in fear. My go-tos are control. Right. And I will try to find control in very insane ways. Right. Like I'm going to try to take control by breaking the rules or creating my own rules. And it always leads to a terrible outcome, but it's fear, that's really what I've come down to. And what I've learned today is so much of my life has been, completely run by fear. And I mask it in a lot of different things, and it comes up in me trying to take control of people, places, things, anything that will make me feel stable. And in doing so, I end up entirely unstable, right? And just eroding everything around me. The fabric of my existence comes completely unraveling.
Yeah, fear is a de-energizing emotion for sure, and it can tie us up. So what was your escape back then? I mean, you're getting in trouble. You're developing some coping skills. You're surviving, and what was your go-to? I mean, when did RJ find relief from that? How did RJ find relief from that at those young ages?
It took the form of acting out, right? So my relief was, I'd run away from home. Like I wouldn't run away in the sense of like I wouldn't come home at night, but I'd leave the house and I'd go cause just chaos in my local neighborhood.
Right.
It was just constant chaos. I wanted to, whether it was ding dong ditching or like, papering somebody's house or throwing eggs at people or starting fights or stealing stuff. I was just an agent of chaos, right? Anything I could do to cause chaos. And that was my escape. That was my escape all the way up until, about 15 and a half. 15 and a half, a lot of my friends were in high school. It's freshman year. Everyone's starting to smoke weed. And I had this very, I wanted to be the last person to do it. I took this real hard stance when all my friends were going down that route between the ages of 13 and 15. And I remember my first friend started smoking weed, and it was like, we can't be friends. You're excommunicated. You're done. You're a reject. And then all of them, one in a row, right? And I'm 15 and a half. I'm just getting my license, and I've got no friends anymore, because I'm standing on this island that I'm not going to do any drugs. I'm never going to do that. And I remember the day I finally caved. I had a stepbrother who at that point now was selling weed, smoking weed, and lived in my house, and invites me down to his room and is like, come on, dude, like you've lost all your friends. Maybe you should give this a try. And I remember being in there. My parents were upstairs. They were asleep. My dad, my stepmom. And I remember I took my first hit of weed, and we were, watching some TV show and just dying laughing. It was like the greatest night of my life. You know what I mean? Like everything was gone. I didn't care about all the pressures, the stresses, the anxieties, the control, the needing people to act a certain way for me to be okay. I was good, right? In that moment, I remember just being good. And we went over to the kitchen and we ate a bunch of food, and it was another way of rebelling that also had a change in my mental state that freed me. So it was the rebellion, and it was also coupled with freeing my mental state, right? And I just thought it was the perfect combination.
Sure.
Right? It was like, this is great. This is what I got to do. And from that point forward, anything I did very intensely. I had to be the best, right? It just, for whatever reason, whatever I was going to do, I needed to do it all the way. So I remember buying a lot of weed. I remember buying bongs and pipes and scales and bags and selling it and smoking it and doing it. And it became my life, right? And then I adopted the identity in high school as the stoner and the dealer. And that became my new thing.
I talk a lot about identity as an important barometer, because I think, our sense of self is one of the most significant driving forces behind our successes and failures. I think we level up to our identity and we level down to our identity. If we achieve above our identity what we really believe about ourselves, that somehow that imposter syndrome kicks in and we'll level down. And likewise, if we go below that, we'll find a way to level up. And I love that you talked about your identity, because you said, say it again, you assumed the identity. Which means your beliefs, I am a stoner, and your behaviors, I buy bongs, I buy weed, and I smoke it, and everyone knows it, applied consistently, is the identity that you took on.
Absolutely. And what was great about the identity is that it was a shield. It was a shield. If I had to interact with people, it wasn't for any other reason than I was either getting high with you or I was selling you drugs, right? And it made it so that I could have social interactions with a purpose and something to hide behind. That's how I got through high school, honestly.
So you fed off of a pattern that started in elementary school. You talked about sitting on the wall, in trouble, leading to leaving the house and causing chaos in the local neighborhood. And now that pattern, of seeking attention in a negative way, causing chaos, became your identity. And now you're in high school, and it's progressive, right? It's not getting any better. It's not like you're doing things to change this. This has become how you survive. And to you, this is it. This is how I'm going to get through life. I almost hear that early version of, it's your job to take care of these kids. You better perform, is weaving its way through the way that you perform in a negative way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we look at patterns and we really learn from. So there you are, the identity of and the behaviors of a high school stoner.
High school stoner, man. High school. And I ran with that. And it was, God, man, those were the days where, it was just starting, right? The beast inside of me was just ramping up. And
the beast,
that's, I very much, I hear the example of having like a tiger in a cage, which is my addiction.
Yeah. Sure.
And that was when it was just starting to come out, right? And just completely take over my entire existence. And, I started getting into a lot more trouble. You talk about it progressing, and it was being on the wall in elementary school. In middle school, it was being, sent home, for academic reasons, for behavioral reasons. In high school, it became that I got expelled, right? I got expelled, and then I went to a continuation school in Oak Park, where I then tried more drugs, got more involved, started realizing that I could manipulate people. I could lie pretty well. I could come up with stories. I could convince people of things. And I remember, I always had good grades for whatever reason. Like in high school, I could take tests and get 100%. Refuse to do homework. just wouldn't do homework. And I'm at this continuation school where you didn't have to do homework. So I had straight A's. I was pretty good at math. And I remember the principal approached me and said, hey, I want to start this new program. And I want to send continuation kids that are doing well academically to go tutor the middle school kids. And you get to leave school early. And I'm like, fantastic. I get less hours at school. Sign me up. I'm in. And so I was supposed to champion this new cause. He was a new principal in Oak Park, and he really wanted to change the stigma of continuation kids. You know what I mean? Like, these are not, drug addicts. They're not social rejects. They're not, these bad criminal type. They're actually good kids that just need a different way of learning, right? So I was supposed to champion this cause, and I went to Medea Creek to a math class. It was an algebra 1, and I was supposed to help tutor these kids. And I would go. So I'd go to high school for about 2 hours. I'd leave to go tutor. I went for about a week, and then I came up with a story to the teacher, and I said, this has been really good. Unfortunately, something's come up, and I can no longer tutor. And Mr. Tabone wanted me to tell you. And so, unfortunately, there's no one to replace me, but I'm the one that's in charge of this. And if somebody does come up, I'll reach out and let you know. So I intersected myself as the liaison for what this was supposed to be, and so that I couldn't go anymore. And so for the next month, I would go to school, and I'd be like, all right, I'm taking off. I'm going to go tutor. And then I would come up with stories every time I saw the principal. Oh man, it's going great. Little Johnny, he was struggling. He just had a breakthrough. And a month later, he ends up, sending an email to the teacher. Hey, how's it going? RJ said everything's going great. And she goes, yeah, it was really good for the week that he was here. We haven't seen him for 4 weeks. He said that, the program ended. And you can imagine, I showed up the next day at school. I had a bunch of friends in that school. We all got stoned before school would start. And I'm walking into the office, and there's mom's car and dad's car. And mom and dad are divorced. Right? So to see mom's car and dad's car at the school at the same time.
We're not celebrating a birthday here.
It's not going to be good.
No.
It's not going to be good. And I'm so stoned that I'm walking up and I'm looking at these two cars. I'm like, that's my mom's car. That's my dad's car. I must be like not seeing this correctly. And I'm like, just get to class, right? And I'm like trying to go up the sidewalk. I'm like, just walk. And I get right past the office door, and I remember the door opening, and one of the office ladies is like, RJ, come on in the office. And I come in, I'm like looking at mom and dad sitting there, just looking at me, shaking their heads, like, yet again, like, what is it this time? And the principal hadn't talked to them yet, and they had no idea why they were there. And I remember my mom she's like, you're so high right now. She's all pissed. You know what I mean? My dad's just shaking his head. And we get called into the principal's office, and he, turns his monitor around and shows us the email thread between him and the middle school teacher, and expels me on the spot. Dad takes car, and I take off running, right? Like, I take off running. I actually ran all the way to my house. I stole my dirt bike, packed a backpack full of clothes, and I ran away. And it was, hopping from friend's house to friend's house, and that was the perpetual story of me.
It's interesting, and I've often shared when I speak publicly about substance abuse and addiction, when I talk about some of the characteristics, that go behind and are behind substance abuse and alcoholism addiction, some of the behaviors, and one of the common themes, that's very clear to me is that of dishonesty with self, dishonesty with others. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the stories that you were making. You're lying,
Yeah.
At such a young age,
Oh, yeah.
and in such a convincing way, to get what you want. This concept, and I'm sure at the time, we're so young. I mean, you learned a pattern of lying, from such an early age, to try to be something that you weren't, or to be something that you didn't feel like. And it's amazing, because I run the long tail of being a habitual dishonest person with myself and with others, so far back as you did. But I never saw myself as a dishonest guy. I really thought I was an honest person, because I was cash register honest. I hadn't yet robbed a bank. I mean, so I'm not a dishonest person. I mean, you don't see me on the most wanted list at the post office. I mean, so of course I'm an honest person. I didn't see the true nature of my dishonesty, until much later in life. But I'm already seeing that pattern of dishonesty evolve in you, and how it served you. It was just a continuation of these behaviors that we develop to protect ourselves from the truth. And so you tell these stories, which are lies, and you've developed a pattern of lying to yourself and to others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so much of it is about, I want what I want. I want what I want, and you're not going to get in my way, and whatever I have to do to get there.
There's no moral compass.
No moral compass. I mean, to a very small degree, but it was if I wanted what I wanted, I was going to get it, at the cost of everything.
And still running. So these patterns keep building. You're still running. Now you're running on your dirt bike with a backpack and sleeping
Totally.
in friends' houses. And
It just builds.
It does. Yeah, I can see it.
It just builds and it builds and it builds. And, the thing that I'll come to find out, right, is that the price has to be paid. I'm taking out a loan constantly. I'm taking out the loan. I'm taking out the loan. I'm taking out the loan. Consequences after consequences after consequences. And that interest is just compounding and compounding, right? And it's, the debt that's going to have to be paid is getting larger and larger, right? And it's funny because when I look back, I had a sense of knowing that, I had a sense of knowing that everything that I'm running from and the lies that are compounding and everything that I'm doing is only adding up. It's digging the hole deeper.
It is. I always tell people, man, what you don't deal with is going to deal with you, and it's going to deal with you when it deals with you. It's going to be abrupt and it's going to be on its terms. But I think that's I find it to be one of the unfortunate parts about the disease of addiction. I talk to most guests that are in recovery or have gotten into recovery about the nature of addiction and how every other disease that we treat, whether it's diabetes or heart disease, or cancer, the whole approach is early intervention. If we catch this early enough, if you get your checkup and we catch this early enough, we can treat this before the symptoms get too bad and you have a much higher rate of recovering and going into remission. This seems to be the only disease we say, you just got to hit bottom. It's like, you really don't have to get any sicker to get better, but for some reason, it becomes the only life we know, and the message is all around hitting bottom. And so, but I think we get so hopeless, as you said, it just gets progressive, and you're taking out these loans, and it just seems like the starting is impossible.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I like this topic of people, the general idea of hitting your bottom, right? I don't have the answer to that. That's something that I've been, searching for because, working in this field and trying to help guys is, what is it exactly, right? Like, how do you inspire somebody to turn the corner and make the change? At what point can you get them to do it? It's a very complex problem, right? And I pull back to one of these things that my dad always said to me as a kid, as I was growing up, and he was like, "You're gonna go until you've reached your full measure," right? Which is kind of the same idea as hitting rock bottom. At what point is the pain great enough that you want to make a change? And, is it hope? Is it inspiration? Is it, some sort of motivational speech? What is it a story that's going to resonate, or is it that you lost your, wife and kid and you ended up homeless like in my situation, right? And that still wasn't enough.
That's right.
That still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Right?
So
end up, you gain everything in the world and then lose it all, and then gain everything in the world and lose it all again.
Yeah, because I think we've still got that identity issue,
Totally.
You're still dealing with that identity. And so we're going to talk about how you tore it down and built it up, because this running got worse, and tell us where it took you, man.
Yeah. So we'll fast forward a little bit. When I get kicked out of this high school and now I'm running and I'm technically homeless for the first time, right? And I'm going to different friends' houses, and my mom she's been the voice of reason for as long as I can remember. My mom is a saint, and she's just been this voice of reason, and calls me and texts me and calls me and texts me, and just constantly. She was the most stable force in my life, right? Always pushing for good, always pushing for greatness, believing in me, and she gets me to go back to school, right? Like, she gets me to come home, turn the motorcycle in. You got to stop this. I can't sleep. I'm dying. Do something. I need you to get back into school. And I remember coming back, and I went to Newbury Park Continuation, Conejo Valley, and I get stabbed with a pencil while I'm there because I'm selling drugs on some other people's turf. And I remember the principal and the counselors were like, "We got to get you out of here." And they allowed me to challenge every class. So if I got an 80% or better on the final exam, I would pass the class, and I could graduate. So I challenged all the classes I had left, and I graduated a year early. And now I'm just running around, graduated, right? And I'm a year early. All my friends are in school, and I'm just running amok, right? And now I officially run away from home. I'm living out of my car. I ended up renting a room in an apartment, and selling drugs became an enterprise for me at this point. You
Sure.
know, I'm 17, going on 18, and becoming a drug dealer is my passion in life. I'm making money, and I got to grow this, and I end up getting a DUI. I crash a car, and my life just starts crushing in on me, just crushing. My girlfriend gets sent to a wilderness program. She gets taken in the middle of the night, right? You know,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the van pulls
Yeah.
up and, grabs her, and she's off. I didn't even get to talk to her. I'm like all heartbroken, like 17-and-a-half-year-old RJ, or maybe 18. And I'm just broken, my car's gone. I've got a DUI. I'm just like this real mess, and I remember calling my dad, like just begging for help, which was just like the hardest thing in the world. It was.
This is when the listeners to Overcome Out Loud are going to go, wow, that's really bad. That must have been it for him.
Yeah, I wish,
Yeah,
man.
don't
Those
we?
were the good soft days, man.
Yeah.
That was when like I said, the beast or the tiger or whatever you want to refer to it as was just sharpening its claws. You know what I mean? It was just warming up. And I met with my dad, and this is where this story takes an interesting turn. We go to dinner, my dad, my mom, and myself, and my dad has two options on the table. He says, if you want my help, you're either going to a community college outside the state of California. He wanted me gone, right? Like, we're just getting you out of California. You're going to go to college. I'll cover it. You're out of here. Or option two, you have a one-way ticket to Sydney, Australia, and you're not going to get any help, and you're not coming back for 6 months. And it was, I think the aim was to, like, get me to go to college. And I just grabbed the ticket. I packed a bag, and I flew to Australia at 18, and I ended up spending like 8 months in Australia. And this was the first time where I, started to develop like a real work ethic. I like laid bricks in Sydney. I had to survive, right? And I really didn't drink or use. I just not intentionally. I just didn't have the time, right? I was like really like on this mission to prove that I could survive. And I ended up traveling like 7,000 miles. I worked on the Great Barrier Reef. I got certified as a diver, and I came back on like cloud nine. Like, I came back with like $8,000 in my pocket. I'm 18.
Making an honest living.
Yeah. I mean, somewhat honest. I didn't have a green card, so I had to work, under the table jobs there and lay bricks. But it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had achieved something.
Sure.
I felt like I did it.
And abstinent.
Not, probably a couple drinks, here and there with some friends that I met there. But for the most part, I didn't get in any trouble. I had nothing. It was work. Stay in hostels. I went camping. I went to Fraser Island. I explored. I made some friends, and for all intents and purposes, it was a pretty good experience, right?
It sounds like you put when you see on the national wildlife shows when they got to do some testing on an animal, they put a dart, they put a tranquilizer dart in it. Sounds like Australia was like you got to put a tranquilizer dart in the tiger in the cage for a few months, but you didn't put it down.
No, I didn't put it down.
Because you didn't change.
Yeah, it was fear, right? It was like fear sobered me for a bit, right? Fear sober. It was like the fear of like, okay, I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm by myself. And back then, my cell phone didn't have international calling. Facebook was just created, so I had to ask my friend to use his college EDU to even make a Facebook. So I really had no communication, back home.
Sure.
So I'm like on my own, and that fear to live and survive, it sobered me for a bit.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, I got to do this. And I came back, and I remember, I come back to California, and I go to my dad, and I'm like, hey, man, all right, so look, I made some money. I did it. I'm ready to go to college now. Let's go up to Santa Barbara. I'm not going to leave California. Look, I proved myself. Santa Barbara City College. So I go up there, and I signed up for classes, and I just did I fell into the exact same thing. I signed up for classes. I went and got the syllabus, And I took that money. I ended up building a hydroponics grow system in my apartment, and then decide, yeah, college is really not for me. But I'm going to tell Dad I'm going to college, right? So I'm
You're
like,
going to tell a story again?
I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to make up this entire story. I'm going to make sure he's happy. I'm going to print fake grades. I'm going to send those home. And I set out back on the mission that, I'm going to be an even better drug dealer now. I'm going to grow my own weed. I'm going to sell my own stuff. I'm going to take this to the next level. And I went right back into the same pattern, man. We're talking within like 3 to 4 weeks of being home, I'm doing exactly the same thing I was doing before, and to an even better, level, right? Like, I'm going to take this to the next place. And I stayed up in Santa Barbara for about a year, and I'm isolated, alone. I'm just selling drugs and getting high, and lying about everything. And then I come up with this great idea. Okay, I'm going to move to Moore Park and go to Moore Park College now. And so then I started the lie of, now I'm at Moore Park College. I transferred. None of that's true. None of that's real. And I didn't even show up to the first day of class. And I somehow got involved through a mutual friend to get a large quantity of weed from the Hells Angels. And so I was getting 5 pounds a week, and I was moving it, and I was selling it. And I was, about 4 to 5 months later, I had about $30,000 in cash. I had, 4.5 pounds of weed, and I leave my apartment. My roommate's up there, and we get robbed at gunpoint. So they kick in the door to my bedroom. They take a safe of all the money. They take all the weed. They take laptops. They take anything of value. I'm watching this from the parking lot. I go up there right after, and that was when things started to get real serious in my life. I'm like, wow, dude, this has got some real consequences. And then I owe these guys money.
Now, are you just afraid, or are you really that aware that you're having some real consequences?
Oh, no. I'm afraid, and I'm aware that I'm having consequences. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, dude, this is like, I'm not like a high school drug dealer right now. Like, this is bad. Like,
kid from Westlake.
This is a kid from Westlake who's like in a real bad spot now.
Yeah.
And I remember this dude showed up like 3 days later because I'm ducking his calls and I owe money. And he like climbed the balcony, comes inside, and holds me up against the wall and basically says, if you don't get my money, some real bad shit's gonna happen. And so then I contacted my friend who I knew was selling Oxycontin, and I had never tried Oxycontin, but I knew he was going to a doctor that was crooked in the valley. And I say, dude, you got to help me. Like, I'm in a real bad spot here, and I got to make some money quick. And so he agrees to help me out. He takes me out to the valley. I go to this crooked doctor off Reseda. I've got some fake X-rays that they were probably off Google or something. I mean, they were just it was
resourceful.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't have to be that resourceful. This was definitely it was known as a fake clinic. Show up and just pretend like you got a broken back or something. And so I walked in there. I paid this guy $500 under the table, who was like the office manager, and he gave me this huge prescription for Oxycontin, and then the 30 milligram Roxycontins, and a huge bottle of Xanax and Somas. And I went to this crooked pharmacy, filled the prescriptions, and I just start selling Oxycontin. I pay back the guys that I owed money to. And my girlfriend at the time breaks up with me. She's like, you're a mess. This is dangerous. This is not cool. I'm out. So RJ's depressed. He lost all his money. He's lost everything of value. He's been robbed. And so I crush up an Oxycontin and I snort it because I saw my buddy doing it, who took me out there. And I remember right before I did it, he was like, you don't want to do this, dude. Like, you don't. Clearly he was deep and stuck in it, and he's like telling me, you don't want to do this. I'm telling you, man, this is a bad choice. You're gonna get addicted to it. And I remember looking at him like, dude, you're so weak, man. Like, you're so weak. Like, how did you get? I've never been addicted to anything other than getting in trouble and like running from my fear and like masking everything and selling drugs. I've been addicted to 100 different things.
Right, but in your mind, I'm different still.
I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm different. I'm not you. And so I do it. I fall in love, right? Like, absolutely, this is the greatest thing I have ever tried in my life. And I remember, the idea of being robbed, being less than, being made a fool of, losing the money, losing my girlfriend, all the depression, the sadness, the control, the trust issues. I mean, you can go on and on and on. We're entirely removed.
Yeah, I think people don't understand, and thank you for that clear picture, that opioids, being a recovering opioid addict myself, work much quicker and much longer on emotional pain than they do on our physical pain.
It's incredible.
And
doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, and no matter what you take them for, if you are like you and like me, and running from our emotional pains, all of those fears, all of those worries, all of that anxiety, all of that less than, all of that double life, that those opioids will attach and work on that emotional pain faster than anything we've ever experienced before. And it is heavily addiction. That's why I see, so many people, having gone through myself opioid addiction and recovery, once you fill that next prescription, man, you really gotta look in the mirror, because I mean the statistics of refilling that prescription now. Thank God we're past that, because it's obviously gotten so much tougher, and we're seeing so many more
regulations.
Yeah,
thank God.
The pharmacies all connected now, and the databases are up and running. And I remember reading that in the paper and getting petrified. And now it's a source of great pleasure to know that they have. But we obviously see people spending more time on the streets, getting inducted into heroin, and finding other ways to ease that. But yeah, it works on our emotional pain much quicker. So it worked on your emotional pain and numbed it very quickly.
It was great.
Yeah,
it was great. All of the everything that had been building up. Right, I talked about taking that loan out. And that's very much how I see it. It was I'd been taking a loan out since I was 8. I had been just pulling on that loan, and the stress and the pressure of that, and the fear, and the double life. You talk about a double life, but when I say double life, it really was 10 or 15 different lives, right? Yeah. It was fragmented and splintered into 100 different pieces, and the moment I hit that opiate, man, I was like, this is it. Like I found my happy place, and everything in the world is right, and so I started selling oxys, and I'm doing them every day. And I remember 2 weeks in, I want the girlfriend back, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop doing all drugs. I'm gonna stop doing all drugs so I can get the girlfriend back. And within about 12 hours, my nose is running. It feels like I have a really bad flu. I'm like sick. It's the first time I ever experienced being dope sick. And I remember I called my buddy who introduced me to the stuff, who told me not to do it. And I'm like, is this what you're talking about? Is this the thing that you were saying that was going to happen to me, that I denied, that I said was, you're weak? And he gave this, I remember he was just like, oh man. Yeah, you did it. You're there. You did it. And I remember the sound in his voice was like that, I told you, and I tried to warn you, man, this is the thing that I have to live with every day.
Can't scare us, can you,
no,
RJ? You can't scare us.
No, man. There's I have to dip my foot in the pool.
Yeah.
I have to. I for whatever reason, I've got to put my hand into the flame and go, oh, that burned. And then maybe twice or 3 times and 4 times.
Yeah, it's the addictive cycle. I mean, I shared this morning at a sociology class on alcohol addiction and culture on the East Coast, and you're describing it so eloquently, that feeling I think that you're going to talk about now, where I don't want to do this anymore. I really would like the girl back. I really want to stop, but fuck, I can't. How empty is that?
It's about as empty as showing up at 7 years old and your house is being moved out, and it's that feeling.
Yeah, man.
Right? It's that one. It's that one where the ground underneath you has fallen out. You have no control, and you can try against all tries, and it will be to no avail. Right? And I remember having a little bit of cockiness on that phone call and being like, oh man, don't worry. I'll handle this. This is fine. I can be sick. I've had the flu. This is fine. I think I made it 2 more hours.
Yeah.
I think I made it 2 more hours. And that was a tough 2 hours.
Sure it is.
It was a tough 2 hours.
Yeah.
That was like 3 days in 2 hours, right? right? And I remember calling him back and
You
begging.
too can have this charmed existence.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember calling him back, and I'm like, dude, where are you? Because I need to come buy a couple off of you, like right now. I can't take it. And in, you know, of course, in great drug addict fashion, he like sold them to me to like for like triple the price, knowing that I'm desperate. And so I go out there and I buy some, and then I'm introduced to black tar heroin. And he says, look, man, you know, getting high on pills is not the way to go. If you buy black tar heroin, it's a whole lot cheaper. And so then we make a run out to the valley, and little car pulls up. Dude gets out of the car, looks pretty clean, definitely was not a drug addict, and sold us some balloons of heroin. And now I'm smoking heroin. And God, man, I remember I was in a meeting yesterday morning, and I heard a kid share, and he goes, I really like heroin, and I really want to do heroin. And then right when I start doing heroin, all I want to do is not do heroin.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, dude, that is like that. I get that. You know what I mean? Like, I get that so much, right? Especially when you're in that place where you're broken and you're like dealing with all that fear and you're fragmented and everything in the world is just a painful place, you know? And it's I want to do hair. I want the relief, but then once I get it and I'm stuck, please save me.
Yeah.
Please,
it's a vicious
save me.
wheel, you know, and it's a lonely place and it's a desperate place. It's an empty place, really. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. It's just empty. You know, there's no soul in that place.
Nothing.
There's no real heartbeat. There's no real soul. We become just a shell. I mean, that existence from your upbringing to now making drug deals and craving and getting further and further down the drug chain to where now, you know, we've gone from high school to you know, some casual dealing to, you know, having some fun to now just making drug deals for heroin on the streets of the valley. Just a common drug dealer and addict.
Stuck in the pit, man.
Yeah, tough.
Stuck in the pit, and
so this has got to be close to the end for you.
yeah, you'd think.
Yeah, you'd think.
You'd think it was, man. And I carried on for probably about the next 6 months, doing, you know, smoking heroin, and until I thought I was pretty convinced I'm gonna die. Like, I'm gonna die a heroin addict, right? Like, it was like 6 months in, and I was like, my existence had gotten so small, my soul had been so robbed from me, and my entire life consisted of finding money and buying heroin. And I remember calling my mom. She comes over. She goes, you got to call your dad. So I call my dad. They find a rehab in Utah. They send me out there. You know, it was a Mormon-based rehab. There was no talk about sponsorship or AA or, like, you know, the spiritual malady. It was more about, you know, talk therapy and groups, and I got a ton out of it.
Sure.
I honestly, I remember getting there. I remember after getting out of the detox. Well, it was funny. There's a little hiccup in the story. I get there, and 2 weeks in, I'm supposed to be there for, you know, 30 days, and I'm 2 weeks in. I'm cleared from the detox, and I'm feeling like a million. I remember being just like, yes, dude. Like, I was so excited. And I went to the counselor's office, like the front desk, and I had packed my bag. I'm like, you guys did a fantastic job. Like, seriously, if you could rate 10 stars, you're ahead of schedule. You did in 14 days what you said was going to take 30. So if we could just call my dad, let's get the plane ticket, you know, get me to the airport, ready to go home. I'm good, dude. Like, you guys have done an amazing job. Seriously, I couldn't be more free. And they're like, yeah, that's really not the way that works here. And if you want to leave, we're not going to be calling your parents. You're going to have to call your parents once you get your stuff back. So I'm like, all right, give me my stuff. I'm leaving. And it's January. There's like 3 feet of snow outside. And I get out the front door, and I've got like a 50-pound big suitcase. And I got my little phone. And I call my dad, and he basically was like, hey, so how does it feel to be homeless in Utah in winter? And I was like,
What?
I mean, I'm calling you because I need a ride to the airport to come home. I mean, it's all good, dude. We're good. Like, it worked. And he's like, yeah, no. You know, you signed up for a program. You're supposed to finish it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I got to finish this. So I turn around, I knock on the door, you know, my head between my tail between my legs, and the program director is like, oh, no, you've been discharged. You can't come back. You've left. And I remember sitting there like, I was stuck, like a rock in a hard spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not letting me back. Dad's not letting me back. And it's cold. Like there's snow. Like it's real. Like we're talking real cold, right? Like Kaysville, Utah, northern Utah. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I have no money and like I have nowhere to go. And they're like, what? Listen, if you want to readmit, that's a discussion we can have. And I'm like, well, I don't really have a choice. So we're going to the office and they were like, okay, so look, you discharged, you left, you're coming in as a new client now. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, so since you're coming in as a new client, we now know the behavioral information that we know. It's no longer a 30-day stay. It's 60 days starting today. And so I had 2 more weeks, now turned into, 60 more days. And I'm like, oh God. And I remember having that first moment of like surrender, like, dude, why do you keep doing this to yourself? Like constantly, like if I'm running away or I'm stealing my motorcycle and I'm like, just like, dude, why do I keep doing this to myself? You know what I mean? And I finally, I was like, all right, I surrender, whatever you guys say. And they're like, great. And they're like, but wait, that's not all. And I'm like, what? And they're like, so after you're done with your 60 days of treatment here, you're then going to go do 6 months in an all-male sober living in Salt Lake City. And I'm like, I remember just being like,
This runway got long.
whoa, dude. I had 14 more days that just turned into like 8 more months. And I remember sitting there, I'm like, okay, all right. I'm supposed to learn something here. Like there's, this
Keep looking up.
This is my thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'm looking at God or a higher power, like whatever, man. There's something here that is happening, and I know it's out of my control. And if I fight it, I'm pretty sure it's gonna get worse.
Or cold.
Yeah, or cold. It's gonna get a lot worse. It's gonna get bad. And so I committed, man. I committed. I was like, all right, and I surrendered to the fact that I was gonna be there for 8 more months. And I had a great time. Like I had probably one of the greatest times of my entire life. I was like,
And 8 months of real sobriety now.
yeah. No sponsor though, no spiritual malady, none of the real kind of, work that I've done this time. But I was sober, and I'd come to find out that it was dry, but I was sober and I felt really good. And I started going to the gym and I made a group of friends who were also sober. And, I'm at this male sober living and we had a camaraderie and we're being somewhat authentic. I'm young. I'm 21 years old at the time, and I felt good, man. I felt good, and I remember coming back home after those 8 months, and I started going to work, and I started working for my dad's business in Newbury Park, and I set out on this mission that I was going to do the right thing, and I was going to be a good person, and I was going to make an honest living, and I was going to try really hard, and I then come to find out, switch one addiction for another, which was, I was going to work really, 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 really hard.
Yeah.
I was going to work really hard, and I was going to go to sleep. I was going to get up early. I was going to go to the office
And obtain.
right? And I was going to start following those things that I saw in my dad, because in my mind, right, the things I thought were good and doing the right thing was working a lot. I got to go work a lot. I got to go earn. I got to go, this is the way that, a man's supposed to be. And that was the example that I followed, right? And so I'd be at the office for 12 hours a day. I'd go to the gym. I'd come home, and it was late at night. I'd go to sleep. I'd repeat. I did that for, the next 3 years. And I got my girlfriend back, the girlfriend that saw me in addiction, and we're together. And I get an apartment. We move in together. I'm about 23 years old. I'm making a little bit of money. I'm saving money, and on the outside, things look like they were pretty good.
So you could pass you could pass the job test, you could pass the girlfriend test, you could pass the nice place to live test, but we still can't pass the mirror test.
Can't pass the mirror test, man.
That's the one that gets us.
Well, yeah, and my personal relationships were struggling.
Yeah.
They were struggling because if anybody got too close to me, they knew the truth, right? They knew the truth, and I knew they knew the truth. And then I never wanted to talk about it, and it's the truth was that I have an overwhelming fear of not being good enough, and I do incredibly insane, tragic things to cover that up.
Yeah.
The
The identity's still not leveled up.
It's not.
The material possessions are leveling up. The accumulation of things is leveling up. But the identity of who RJ is, the authentic self, and that's, it's just so important, to talk about that is still not leveled up.
It was getting worse.
Yeah, I was getting
to be
worse.
honest, it was getting worse because everything in my life had pointed me to this idea that if I did good and I worked hard and I earned and I made money and I had the girl and I had the place and the car and a little bit of money in the bank, that would mean that I was good enough. And you know, I heard a talk by somebody, you know, God, a couple years ago, and he talked about this idea of, he was talking about job interviews, and he said, you know, talk about strengths and weaknesses, and somebody says a weakness and they spin it to a strength, like, oh man, I work so hard that, you know,
Sure.
and it's like, okay, I see what you did there. You spun it into a strength, right? And he goes, no, I want to hear the real thing. Let me tell you about me. And this is a drug addict talking. He owns a business. And he's like, you know, my real weakness is I work extremely hard to obtain something that I really, really want. And when I get it, I feel almost nothing. Right. And
The
that,
chase.
yeah.
The chase.
Yeah, it was the chase. And I'm thinking that this land exists through this item or this thing or some sort of status, whatever, that's going to set me free, you know, and I would achieve those goals. I would achieve the things. And on the other side, it made me feel more empty because it didn't do anything at all for the spiritual malady. It just did nothing. Right. And if any, like, it was just like anything I throw into this hole just disappears and is eaten up and leaves me just
Empty.
alone, you know, and God, go back to the story. My girlfriend and I, we move in together, right? And I'm still living this way, and I'm achieving more, and I'm making more money, and I end up, you know, buying a house. We get married, and I have a daughter, right, at about 24 and a half. So 24 and a half years old. I've got a house, I've got a few cars, I've got a motorcycle, I've got a kid on the way, and I've got a wife, and I'm married. And I remember going out to an Italian restaurant and at the top of Lindero, Rustico, if you've been there.
Sure.
And I ordered a glass of wine at just almost 4.5 years sober. And, you know, in my mind, I wasn't an alcoholic.
No, you're good. I've done this for 4 years. I'm
good.
I got a lot of pictures in the photo album and on my phone to show you all these things.
Look at my life.
Doesn't work, does it?
Look at my life. No, it doesn't work at all. And you know, I remember when the reason I had the drink was I have a brother and sister who are 3 years younger. They're twins. They could drink with impunity and have fun. They did not have the same sort of disease that I have, right? And they could go out with friends, they could drink, they could have fun, they had relationships that were abundant. And I wanted that. And for some reason, I thought that if I had a few drinks, that I could achieve that, right? I wanted that. That was the thing.
That the obsession and the craving wouldn't kick in this time. You've really now put the tiger down.
Yeah, and I wanted relationships.
Yeah.
Like, things obviously were not doing it. And I thought if I drank that my relationships would be better. I mean, it was insane. It's incredibly insane. And I remember having this glass of wine and I remember leaving and just hating it. Like, why? And okay, I don't really like wine. Maybe I'm gonna get beer. So I remember it was the 2012 Lakers vs. Celtics finals. It was on that week, and I remember, you know, 2 days later I bought a 6-pack of Heineken. And I drank 3 Heineken that night. I was in the garage. I had a TV in the garage. I'm working on my motorcycle, and I drank 3 Heineken. I'm by myself. By myself, drinking 3 beers, watching the game. You know, completely alone, man. My life was so small, and I drank those 3 beers. I'm like, all right, well, didn't really like that. 2 days later, drink the next 3 beers in the next game. Didn't do it. Went on Facebook, found an old friend. Convinced myself if I just got a little bit of heroin and just use a little bit, and just recreationally, right? I'm educated now. I obviously know I can't use the way I used to. If I just use a little bit, I'll never pass that threshold of becoming addicted and stuck to it. And so I hit up this friend, and I figured, well, if I'm going to go through all this work, I might as well buy enough to last forever. So I bought $1,000 worth of heroin, and I did a little bit, and that little bit turned to using all of it within the next 4 days, and I'm completely strung out. I'm lying to my wife. I'm going to work loaded, and the entirety of my existence that I had built starts to unravel. I mean, everything, you know. And fast forward a little bit over the next, 2-3 months, I end up losing my job. I lose all my money. I lose my house. I lose my wife. I lose my kid. And there's a restraining order against me. And I'm homeless in Simi Valley, and I had a little bit of clothes. I remember wearing like a button-up shirt, and I'd go into Starbucks and I'd clean up, and I found a cardboard box and stole a Sharpie and had a cup from Burger King, and I'm standing off the Erringer and Sycamore exits, and with a cardboard sign, looking good. And I remember the sign. What I wrote on the sign was "Wife and kid at home. Anything helps. God bless." And wearing a collared shirt, so I didn't look homeless. I'm not homeless. I'm just out here because I'm in, and again, manipulating, finding the ways to get what I wanted, and I'd get $100 in an hour, and then I'd ride it on a little bicycle that was stuck in first gear. I looked like a little clown going down, Simi, like me in first gear. I mean, literally, it would take me, like an hour or longer to get to the other side of Simi, and I'd meet my dealer, and at this point it had progressed. I'm using needles and I'm shooting speedballs, and that was when I almost got to this point of just surrendering, to the addiction, not surrendering in a good way, surrendering in a very, very bad way.
That it had you, and it's just not going to let me go. And this is the lot of my life. And I just, I think it's so interesting. And although this story is in my opinion just so typical of the addictive cycle, and again, your identity hasn't changed, you haven't filled the hole in your soul, and you keep ending up right back where you think you deserve, which is homeless once again, despite having acquired many times now, whether it was in Australia or whether it was in Utah or whether it was, back after Utah working at your dad's business, and you'd proven to yourself that you could accumulate, but not worthy of it, you will tear it all down. And you've gotten to this low point again, which is, I call that hopeless desperation of just an empty existence. And, so when people are there, RJ, and whatever version of that despair and loneliness they're in, what was the catalyst for you to start walking out of that? I mean, that hole seems deep, that hole seems familiar to you, and at some point you've got to decide that there's something different you can be doing.
It's funny. I sponsor a lot of guys, and I talk about this idea of frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, right? Because I can tell you it wasn't the daughter, it wasn't the ex-wife, it wasn't the things, it wasn't the money, it wasn't a job, it wasn't a girlfriend that got me sober. The only thing that kept me going at the end there to try again was I truly didn't want to die. That was the last stop on the bus, right? Like nothing else mattered. Last stop on the bus, I'm either going to be dead or in jail, and jail kind of sounded okay. It kind of sounded okay at that point, and I just didn't want to die, and I remember picking up a payphone, didn't have a cell phone, I was using the payphones.
Who'd you call?
I called my dad.
Yeah,
called my dad, and he really wasn't answering my phone calls for a while there, and I called my dad, and
it's painful to watch,
Totally.
It's painful for our loved ones to watch us cycle down into the spiral down after so many levels of hope. I talked to a family, just a few weeks ago whose son was trapped homeless at the Four Seasons, family at home, drinking himself, into oblivion. And when his dad heard he had called, there was such a ray of hope, like, maybe he'll come out of this. And the family's just, it's so painful. So yeah, he hadn't been talking to you, but he answered the call.
He answered the call, man. And I got to tell you, he's not an Al-Anon guy, but he certainly has all the principles of being an Al-Anon guy.
Sure.
And he very much held me at arm's length. You know what I mean? If you're doing these things, like, hey, I love you, but we don't have a relationship. And he picked me up and he dropped me off at a Motel 6 in Newbury Park. And he said, "Here, I'll get you a room for the night," And so I'm at this Motel 6, and I think he paid for about 4 or 5 nights, and it was right around 4th of July. And my mom gets wind that I'm at the Motel 6, obviously from my dad, and she ended up calling Sima over at the Fellowship House.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good people.
Amazing. I love them. And Ross ends up showing up at Ross, Sima's husband, shows up at the motel door, knocks on the door, and I'm like in a coma. And goes, "Pizza delivery." it's Ross, man. If you know Ross,
There's
it's
good people out there to help us, aren't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he showed up in character, and I remember opening the door and he gave me two choices. He goes, "You're either going to walk out this door right now without saying a word and not turning back and getting in my car, or if you hesitate or if you turn around, I'm leaving and you don't have an option and you're stuck here." And I remember being like, "Fuck, let's go."
Yeah. Walk
Please.
out of the cave, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, dude. I walked forward and I got in his car and I detoxed cold turkey. It was about 2 weeks of that was the worst detox I ever went through in my entire life. I was on their couch, just dying, man. I had an abscess on my wrist, so my wrist was all bandaged. My face was picked off. I ended up going to a doctor later. I had strep throat. I had mono. I was rough.
I'll put up a picture of you when you when you were hanging the signs.
Well,
I've seen it now, and it's to see you today here in front of me. I mean, not able to really put into words what it must mean for your family, but to see the man you are today, it gives me such hope. That your message and that your story of that bottom and that decision to walk out of the your version of the cave and ask for help, can lead to what you've become today, because you're now 4 years in the rearview mirror of your bottom, so to speak.
Well, and get this. We'll fast forward. I'm over at this sober living, and I got a sponsor, and I ended up getting about 3 months there, and I ended up saying, this really isn't for me. I need to go work and I need to make money and I got to leave. I ended up leaving that sober living against, the advice of everybody. Take a job down in Beverly Hills for a tech company and start earning again, start making money, move out to West Hollywood, and I've got a condo. No more sponsorship, no more sober friends, nothing. I'm just doing my exact same pattern again.
So there's behaviors that go along with being sober and happy that you had engaged in. Mm-hmm. And then you decided to no longer engage in those behaviors, but pursue what you thought would make you happy again.
Correct.
The monetary possessions. I need to pass the mirror. I need to pass all the other tests again. I don't want to look in the mirror yet.
Yeah.
And it led you right back to the same part.
And 3 years later, I have a drink. And so imagine 4.5 years and then 3 years. And at 3 years, I became the vice president of a tech company doing sales and partnerships. I was in the first floor of the Netflix building. Not Netflix, but there was a tech company right below Netflix on Maple. And I had, corner office. And, man, that same emptiness was there again. You know? It never left. It was there again. It was louder than ever. And I started drinking and using in about the next, 30 days. I blow through about $35,000 of cash. I lose my job. And I pawn everything in my condo, and I'm shooting speedballs, and I'm homeless once again, stealing food from Whole Foods off Fairfax and Santa Monica, and on the side of Whole Foods, just dying, just absolutely dying, and one more time, I've got to call Mom, and I got to call Dad, and they pick me up and drop me off at a sober living in Thousand Oaks. And with Jim, and they were like, I remember being at this place of like, dude, I'm 27 years old, and I have built 2 separate careers and lives, and lost them, in a matter of like days.
That's right.
Like days, like years.
The soul has gotten no attention by RJ.
Yeah, just, and So when you talk about this idea of when someone's got to hit their bottom, do they have to hit their bottom? Do they not? I don't know. I know for me, I was so strong-willed that it had to be beat out of me. I had to beat it out of me. Right?
Yeah.
I had to go through that gut-wrenching process of putting in that sort of work, losing everything, doing it again, losing it again, to come in and say, I'm going to listen to somebody.
Yeah, and I think it's so accurate. And I think the idea, behind this part of the podcast is that now you've gotten behind those behaviors and you've filled that hole in your soul on a consistent and regular basis.
Totally.
And describe the freedom, you know, the you pass the mirror test. You know,
Okay.
you can pass the mirror test every day. You're a guy that is of service to other people. We'll talk about the causes that you've got into. RJ is the founder and operator of Oak Forest Recovery. He's just launched, along with a clinical director, his Oak Forest IOP Recovery Center. He is a founder and president of Mad Rose Media. He is a very active and influential person in the recovery community. I see him often. He is living a full life, you know, and I think has the freedom of his heart and his soul and a purpose that it doesn't seem like you'd ever had before. And it's not, you know, you don't come flashing a Rolex. You don't come, you know, rolling in, you know, flashing material. You come flashing a soul that you wear openly, you know, and authentically, and you connect with people in a way that is really meaningful. And I know, you know, when you talk about the life you have today, I think, you know, if I was to really describe your, you know, recovery, it is connection. I know you talk about connection. I know you know the importance of connection, and I know you are connected at a deep level today. And how freeing is that? I mean, how nice is it to go to put that head on that pillow, you know, today versus, you know, being in that Motel 6?
I have moments almost every day that bring me to tears of happiness.
Yeah.
Almost every day.
Yeah.
Almost every day. And it's odd when I don't. And if I don't, I know that there's something wrong. And I know there's some work I got to do. But I can tell you this idea of connection, I followed direction long enough. And I remember I was at an AA meeting, and I shared about my story for the, you know, kind of like the full thing that we just did, right? But in a very abbreviated way. And I at the end of it, I said, you know, I'm here. I've gotten my 12-step instruction, and I'd like to take another man through the work. And right after I shared, somebody else raised their hand and said, RJ, I heard your share. I don't know where you are. I couldn't see you. I need you to be my sponsor. And I met with him after the meeting, and I got his phone number, and he was homeless. And he was living underneath the bridge off Moore Park Road. And I dropped him off there. I took him for a ride. And we talked about the steps. I remember getting on the freeway right after that. I tell all my guys this. I was getting on the freeway, and a song came on that played at the rehab I was at in Utah the first time I got sober, when I really felt that camaraderie, when I really felt connected to like other men who were trying to do the right thing. And it randomly came on my Pandora station. And I talk about this moment, man, and it you know, some people are like, oh, whatever. But for me in that moment, man,
it's real.
For me in that moment, dude, it was, you can add up all the times that I used any opiates. You can add up all the different times that I, you know, shot speedballs and was seeking relief. None of it came, you know, even slightly close to what it felt like that day when I was getting on the freeway and that song came on. You know, I had tears streaming down my face. I had pretty much nothing to my name. You know, I had a Prius. I had an EBT card. I think I had like $200 in the bank. I had nothing, right? It was like,
It felt better than you'd felt ever.
I was free, man.
And,
I was free.
you know, I guess the question I'll ask before we wrap up and talk about what you're doing now is that level of freedom and happiness available to anybody, no matter where they're at in the cycle of feeling dependent on a substance? Is that something that anybody can access?
It's something that I think everybody should access.
Yeah.
You know,
Said.
Not only is it available to anybody, but it's something that everybody should access. And I you know, one of the things that drives me, man, every day is honestly, man, when I have a morning routine and I pray and I meditate and I think about things, and one of the things that haunts me, that pushes me, is the level of people existing today that don't know that. Right? That's an epidemic.
It is.
Right? Like, that's bigger than I think any disease. It crosses the barriers and boundaries of alcoholism or drug addiction. I just feel super lucky that I'm an addict because I was forced to find it. I was forced to find it. There are so many people out there living an existence completely unconnected, and it is available to them too.
It is.
Right?
That's right.
It's available to anybody. And that, this idea of connection, man, it's what I craved. It's what I wanted. It's what I've been missing since I was 7. And the day that I found it, I realized how many other people also don't have it, And if, you talk about this podcast and providing hope for people, that's a mission, to be able to inspire people, motivate people, whatever it takes.
Just share the information. I think we're just we are given an opportunity to share information that you don't have to. If you're hopeless, you can turn to hope, and you can ask for help, and people that have been more challenged than you may be, and you don't have to be any sicker to get better. And so, I just applaud you. And I just, but before we wrap up, can you just share a little bit about what you've created? Because I know how I feel about Oak Forest, being in the world of trying to help people with substance abuse issues myself, how many people I've had to avail of your services in such a caring way. And tell me about just Oak Forest, how people can find you, what it is that you guys are doing over there, and your new venture with the IOP, and how we can let people know another avenue to get help if they're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take it right from, when I met that first guy that I sponsored, I found a house in Agora Hills, and it was a rundown house. It was about 10 years vacant, and got this house, moved in, had 2 ideas. One was I was going to turn it into a sober living and have my sponsees live there. And we were going to work on the house and fix it up. If that didn't work, I was going to flip the house and just flip houses. In about 6 months, there was 10 of us there. In 12 months, there was 15 of us there. I lived there for the first 2.5 years. It's a high structure, gender specific, male sober living. And at year 2, we had 17 guys there. We had a small staff. I then opened a women's house, and that grew rapidly. Both houses stayed 90 to 100% full almost immediately. We believe in real connection. We have real results. There's nobody that ever comes into the program that doesn't leave better off, right? I don't proclaim to be the end all be all. I'm not a cure. I can't fix anybody, but I can certainly give what I found. Right? And I can show people the path, and that has worked incredibly well. And we have a massive alumni network that's grown. We have a bonfire meeting we do every Thursday.
How many people now showing up?
100 people.
Yeah, it's big.
100 people.
Thank you so much.
It's in the local community. There's people that show up. I mean, it's a community has grown up around me. A community has grown up around me, and it's been from the principles of just trying to help and connect with people. Like with every last piece of energy that I have, right? And then about a year ago, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this sober living thing, and I believe in behavior modification, and I believe in the steps, and I believe in, all these things that I believe in. But there's complex cases, and there's we all have complex things going on, and one of the things you talk about is trauma, right? We all have it. I don't care who you are. You can come from the best existence ever. We all have some form of trauma, and a lot of people that end up in these in coming into sober living or treatment, there's underlying issues.
There are,
right?
Yeah,
and I've seen it. And I try to reach it, and I only have so many tools, right? As a sober living, and so a year ago I said, I got to solve this problem. I got to do it. And it's got to come from the principles that I believe in, and I want a unified front, and I want like-minded people. And people who believe the same things I believe, people who are invested, people who live it, It's one of the things I believe in. I live in my houses. I sleep at my condo that I had to be forced to leave my own sober living. And I got a condo, and 2 of my alumni live in my condo with me. I live this thing. I'm in it. And so everybody that is a part of the clinical team also has to be that same, because it's about connection.
It is.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
It's got to be connected from the top to the bottom. And so I I started on the mission a year ago. 6 months ago, it really started to form. I found this amazing woman named Melissa Burke. She's our executive director. She's absolutely incredible. And Melissa and I really identified on a lot of topics, and we were like, let's do this. Let's do this. We're aligned. And we found an office building off Lindero in Westlake, and it's a beautiful place. And Melissa has just made it absolutely gorgeous. And it's all about healing, and it's all about trauma. And she's an EMDR trauma specialist from the top. And then we started building out the team, and we found a clinical director named Karina Santillo, who's amazing. And then we found a whole team of therapists, right? And it's cool because Melissa's actually training them all in EMDR and training them in all the things that she believes in that are aligned with my values, right? And then we found a house in Westlake, a property that has 3 houses on it. It's on 3.5 acres. And so today we've got 5 houses on 3 properties and a treatment center off Lindero that embrace this idea of I don't ask anybody to do anything that I don't do myself,
Well, I can tell you, if you can't hear it in his voice, I'm looking across from him, and that is just a far cry from a guy hanging a sign on the 118 freeway, man. And I think the world is better off with the passion that you have. Just embrace all that you've become, and all that you provide to people. It's inspiring, I think, for everybody to know that no matter how far down they think they've gone, that those kinds of opportunities are available if they can get behind a set of behaviors and ask for help. And man, it's just remarkable. Now, I could be wrong, but isn't there an older guy that comes over to that house of yours and cooks dinner weekly?
Oh, yeah, my dad.
That's right. So,
my dad. Yeah, you want to talk about the full circle?
That's what I was talking
this
about,
guy,
man.
This guy shows up every Tuesday and cooks dinner for everybody.
That's right, he does. And so, when we talk about relationships healing and families healing and people coming together to I've been over a few times on a Tuesday and seen the kitchen in action, and man, it must be a real treat to see what the two of you from him leaving you in the snow up in Utah to now cooking dinner for your guys. That's what this podcast is about. That's overcoming. Thank you for overcoming out loud with us to share a message of hope, RJ, and I hope you know how much it means to me to have you a part of my life as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really, anytime I can get on and talk about this, and if my story helps anybody in any way, I got to do it.
Yeah, awesome.
I have to do it.
Well, thanks so much, brother. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.